You're live on YouTube to do the Srimad Bhagavatam. I never dreamed that this would happen, but I'm happy that it is. So, let's do our fancy video effects right now. Let's see how they go. Boom. Oh, that wasn't so fancy. Oh, that's in the wrong order. There we go. Swish and swish. Something like that. Gradually getting more cosmopolitan. And summary of the previous content. This is what Bharata had told Raghunath, or Bharata, who we know as Bharata, but he's just known as the teacher. This is what he said so far. He said, first thing he said was, reality is not easy to perceive. How come? Because it's not what it seems to be. And he says, the second thing he said was, education and intellect alone don't help. Only a sadhu can utilize those things to begin to comprehend reality. So his point was, it's not so easy to comprehend reality, because the surface of the reality is not the actual reality. And it's not a question of intellect alone that lets you perceive reality. This is the interesting point he's going to bring up. He says only somebody that he calls as a sadhu would be able to start to understand reality using their intellect. So it's not that intellect doesn't understand reality. Intellect is what we use to understand reality. That's the tool. That's like saying wrenches don't turn screws. Wrenches turn screws. Intellect understands reality. But intellect doesn't correctly understand reality or understand what reality truly is unless the person is what Bharata calls a sadhu. So then he explains what a sadhu is by explaining what it's not, really. He says, anyone who doesn't realize that the pleasures of our perceptions are like dreams is not a sadhu. And so cannot grasp reality no matter how much education and intellect they have. So what's he saying? What he's saying is a person who has vested interests will never see things in an unbiased manner. And a person who doesn't see things in an unbiased manner never sees things as they are. When we have vested interest in what we're perceiving, then we favor the perceptions that are in line with what we want. And so only a person who doesn't have vested interests can see reality, can use their intellect effectively to see reality for what it is. By vested interest, we mean we want certain things and we don't want other things, because we think certain things are pleasurable or enjoyable and other things are not. And so it's the mind which interferes with the intellect. This is why there's a classic Moon-Mercury tension in astrology, because Mercury gets interfered with by the moon, but the moon doesn't get interfered with by Mercury. Mercury, or intellect, gets interfered by bias, subjectivity, opinion, desire, and emotion, the moon. That's what he's saying. That's what the Brahma is saying. So only a person whose moon is placid would have a clear intellect, an objective intellect. So maybe I already explained what he says in number 4. Attachment to things distorts our perception of them. And the fifth thing he said was the mind subjects itself to what it wants from its perceptions and so becomes enslaved by them. This is how the superior and limitless mind becomes trivialized and subjected to inferiority and limitations. The mind is supposed to be able to comprehend and experience everything and anything. It's designed to comprehend and experience everything, all of reality in total. But because of its bias and subjectivity towards certain things and away from other things, it therefore limits itself. The mind thinks itself defined by its perceptions. This is why we say reality is a product of your imagination. The attached, perceived, and imagined reality. Reality is not exactly a product of our imagination, but it is. Because the reality that we perceive, the bent reality, is a product of our bending lens, our mind. This is why we say reality is a product of the mind. Any questions so far? That's what we heard last week in detail. That's a review of what we heard last week in detail. Does that make sense? This should make a lot of sense. The whole scientific revolution, the whole scientific attitude is this. This is the spirit of science. The spirit of science is objective observation will reveal the truth. Subjective observation won't. So we have to take our feelings and our emotions out of our objections and take out our rulers and take out our measurements and just make objective observations. Really. So the practice would be remove your subjective biases. Remove your biases, and so that would be done by different means, but that's basically the objective of all the yogas, is to make the mind neutral to its experiences, not be afraid of its negative experiences, and not be addicted to its positive experiences. Okay, let's go on and let's see what he says today. Today we're going to look at 8 through 12. When translating this, is Alf here? I didn't see Alf so far, and that's going to be a shame if he's not here. Alf is here, yay! Sorry for that shout. Maybe I knocked you off your seat. Alf, I was thinking of you because do you remember Rahugana when he first got shocked by this apparently retarded person suddenly showing himself to be a master spiritualist? He asked him, "Are you Kapila?" And I was wondering where he pulled that out from. But now that Bhārta is talking, especially in today's content, it's going to be very Kapila-esque. It has very much the same flavor of Sankhya or Vedic science, spiritual science that Kapila gave. So let's see what he says. guṇānuraktaṁ vyasanāya jantoḥ kṣemāya nairguṇyam atho mana syāt yathā pradīpo ghṛta-vartim aśnan śikhāḥ sadhūmā bhajati anyadā padaṁ tathā guṇa-karmānubaddhaṁ vṛttīr manaḥ śrayate nyatra tattvam. Our mind can have predilection to seek pleasure in the qualities of perception, or it can be reposed peacefully without such qualities. That's the first two lines. The first two lines is he says the mind, mana, it has two possible conditions. One is guṇānuraktaṁ, vyasana. So it can have the vasana, or the inclination, to pursue anurakta, guṇa. Guṇa is a very important word to understand. Guṇa means a quality, a desirable quality. So for example, shininess, right? Our minds basically have the vasana to pursue shininess. You see something sparkly and then, wow, what is that? It may have different things, like maybe there's a woman who likes hefty men, so her mind has a programming to pursue that kind of silhouette. Maybe there's a man who likes blondes, So his mind has a programming. When he sees blonde hair, he's anurakta. The vasana is anurakta for that guna. Maybe there's somebody who likes loud music, that guna. Maybe there's somebody who likes quiet music, that guna. Maybe there's somebody that likes hot food. Maybe there's somebody that likes cold drinks. So all the different gunas. The mind is full of vasanas. Each individual's mind is full of their own individual vasanas for their own particular gunas. So he says that's one condition of the mind. And the other condition is kṣemāya, nairguṇyam. To be peaceful without those qualities. Kṣemāya means to be peaceful, reposed, to be restful, to be content, to be okay. To feel safe, to feel okay. That's kṣema. Nairguṇyam means without the gunas. So there's the two qualities of the mind. It's actually very eye-opening. The guy who likes the blondes is in distress when there's no blondes to pursue. The person who likes hot coffee is in distress when there's no hot coffee. They want hot coffee, so they're in a state of want or need most of the time. They're in a state of lacking most of the time because their mind has vasana of guṇa-nuraktaṁ to pursue a particular quality. So that mind is not described as kṣema. That mind is vikshepa. It's very disturbed. It's a troubled mind. The more desires we have, the more our minds are dissatisfied. So the other type of person is the person who is okay without the qualities. They're okay if there's no sparkly thing. They're okay if there's no shapely thing. They're okay if there's no fragrance that they want. The mind still feels peaceful. They don't have strong vasana for a particular guna, so therefore they're kṣema. They're peaceful. The mind is clear. If you look in water, it's like looking at a mind. And if you look at water that hasn't moved for a long time, then you'll be able to see down to the bottom because all the sediment settles. But if you look at water that's always turbid, it has people jumping in it all the time, it has people swimming in it all the time, then all the mud from the bottom gets swooshed up around. So that water that's got the sediment floating through it is like the mind that has a lot of vasanas, that has a lot of desires for the guna. It's not going to give you a clear picture of reality. You're not going to be able to see through it. But the mind that's kṣema, that's peaceful, it doesn't move around much. The sediment settles, the mind becomes clear, and you can see straight through it. So that was the first line. Our minds can have predilection to seek pleasure in the qualities of perception, or it can be reposed peacefully without such qualities. Now the remaining four, he gives an analogy for this. A lamp-wick in ghee. It's one of the nicest things. The Vedic culture had so much prosperity that they would use butter oil for common things like lighting. That is so much prosperity. That's so much wealth. So they generally used to fuel the lights with ghee, which is butter oil. Okay, I mean, can you imagine that, using butter oil for lights? Try to buy butter oil today. It's like the most expensive oil you can get. Anyway, so imagine a cotton wick in a little bowl of ghee. That's your lamp, right? That wick can aśnan, That's ghṛta. Ghṛta is ghee. So there's a pradīpo, which is ghṛta-vartim. There's a wick, which is in ghee. It can eat the ghee, aśnan. If it eats the ghee, then what? How would a wick eat the ghee? The wick would eat the ghee by fire, just the same way we eat things. So by śikhāḥ. Śikhāḥ means a plume. śikhāḥ. So by its fire, by its flame, it can eat the ghee and produce dhūma, smoke. Bhajati here means produce. Or anyadā. Okay, a lamp wick in ghee can consume the ghee to produce fire and smoke, or it can remain in its natural state. Padaṁ. It doesn't have to burn. It doesn't have to eat the ghee. Like during the day, you don't turn the light on. It's at night, when there's a lack of light, that you burn the ghee. This is a good analogy, because that part of the analogy will also be instructive. So, what is he talking about here? There's a cotton wick in a palm full of ghee in a bowl. You can light the wick on fire, and then it eats the ghee and produces smoke. Or the wick, you could just leave the wick alone. He says, likewise, tathā, our mental functions can be wrapped up in the pursuit of desirable qualities, or can take repose in reality. Tathā guṇa-karmānubaddhaṁ vṛttīr mana-vṛtti śrayate nyatra tattvam. Holy smoke. So that wick, the cotton wick, is our mind. And then if the wick is the mind, then what is the ghee? What is the ghee, boys? Do you know what is ghee? It's the most delicious thing. So what's the ghee? It's the guṇa. It's the quality. The tasty thing, the thing that we want to experience. So what the wick is the mind, the ghee is the guṇa. The wick can try to eat the ghee. And if it does, then it burns. So what's the fire? The fire is the vasana, the desires. And then what's produced? Smoke. Smoke is the karma, the side effect, the fatigue. And then what happens to the wick? It burns itself out. And what happens to the ghee? It burns out. Everybody just gets fatigued by the pursuit of the guṇa. The guṇa gets used up, the wick gets used up, the smoke gets pumped up. We make the room smoky, you predicted it, Bana. Or we can leave the wick alone, leave the guṇa alone, let the wick be in the guṇa, let the wick be in the ghee, no need to light it. Why would there be no need to light a lamp? This is really important. Because it's not dark. If it's dark, then you need to light the lamp. But if it's not dark, you don't need to light the lamp. What does that mean? If your desires are already fulfilled, then you don't need to light to burn desires through your mind. If you have experience of happiness already, then you don't need to pursue objects. So he says, likewise, the mind can get wrapped up, anubaddha, in the pursuit of desirable qualities, guṇa-karma. Guṇa-karma means the pursuit of desirable qualities, anubaddha, get wrapped up in that. Vṛttīr, the mind's functions. The mind's functions can get wrapped up in pursuing the qualities, or they can just experience the truth. This is interesting. If the mind's powers, the mana-vṛtti, don't get guṇa-karmānubaddhaṁ, if they don't get wrapped up in pursuing desirable things, then they can actually, the same vṛttis can experience tattva, which is reality. So do you understand that? Our mind can have predilection to seek pleasure in the qualities of perception, or it can be reposed peacefully without such qualities. A lamp-wick in ghee can consume the ghee to produce fire and smoke, or it can remain in its natural state. Likewise, our mental functions can be wrapped up in the pursuit of desirable qualities, or can take repose in reality. Now, sorry about the sniffling. It's like a little too cold. Now, you might ask, if you were Rahugana, you would then ask, what are the mental powers, mana-vṛtti? Because this is great. We are great. You know, this whole like movement of fulfill your potential and everything, live up to your potential. It's pathetic how much they don't really understand how much we fall short of our potential. They think that to fulfill your potential means to achieve your vasana. To achieve your desires, to fulfill your potential. Our actual potential is to experience tattva, reality itself. Our minds can experience reality. That's our potential. This is a great thing. So Rahugana's natural question is, what are those powers of the mind? I want to know more about the powers of the mind, because these are the powers which can experience either gunas, desirable qualities, or tattva. Wow. So the next thing that the teacher, aka Bharata, will say is he's going to explain what the mental functions are. What are the mana-vṛtti? Ekadashasan manaso hi vṛttaya akutaya panchadhyo bhimanaha mantrani karmani puram chatasam vadanti haikadasha vir bhumi. The mind has 11 functions. The mana-vṛttis are ekadasha. There's 11 mental powers or functions. 5 of them, pancha, are for aspirations, akuti. Mind has 5 powers of aspiration, and it has what's an aspiration? An aspiration means an inspiration. An inspiration to action is an aspiration. 5 of those, and also 5 for diya, which means 5 for perception. So inward, outward, just like breath, in, out, just like male, female, in, out. So the mind also has the in-out dynamic. It has powers that go out, those are the akutis, and it has powers that come in, those are the diyas. It has 5 coming in and 5 going out. So that equals 10. Matrani karmani. Puram. What's the 10th? What's the 11th? The 11th is called the abhiman. The mind has 11 functions, 5 for aspiration, 5 for perception, and then the abhiman. The abhiman is the fundamental function of the manas. The abhimana is the fundamental function of the manas. It is self-identification. The fundamental function of our mental apparatus is to give us a concrete understanding of me. It's a way to realize our existence. That's the fundamental function of the mind, is a way to realize our existence. So that's called abhiman, or the self-identification. It uses the 5 aspirational functions to pursue 5 types of action. It's 5 perceptual functions to experience 5 sensations. And its self-identification function to establish a locus of habitation. This, O hero, is why they say there are 11 realms. This is very interesting. And in the next text, he's going to say sometimes they say there's 12. So they would also maybe sometimes say there's 12 realms. So let's look at the words. What realms? Realms, the word is bhumi. So the mind has 11 realms, 11 bhumi, 11 earths, 11 planets. Vadanti ha. That's why they say ekadasha bhumi. There's 11 worlds. Because there's 11 mental functions. There's 5 worlds of action. There's 5 worlds of perception. And there's 1 world of identity. So those are the 11 worlds. He gives a paradigm here where the mental function has something that it gets attached to. So again, it's like a male-female dynamic. The mental function being male, and then the thing that it gets attached to being female. So like, if there's a function for perception, then it's attached to that particular object which provides that perception. If there's a function for action, then it gets attached to that particular object that enables that action. And if there's a function for identity, then it gets attached to that object which enables the identity. So for the akutis, the objects are called the karmas. For the 5 powers or functions of action, the objects are called our powers of action, karmas. For the 5 senses of diya or perception, then the objects are called the matras, the sensations, the basic units of sensation. And then for the abhiman, the object is called the pura, which means the habitation. So it basically means the body. Okay? It's hard to breathe and talk at the same time. Yes, self-identification is the 11th. Ruchira asks, so the realm of action is different from the corresponding realm of sensation. Maybe of course these realms are interconnected. And he mentions this as though it's something we know about. Like he's telling the king, that's why they said this. That's why they say there's 11 realms. But personally, I never heard anybody say there's 11 realms before. But the king must have heard this before because he got educated in a Vedic culture. So the king probably doesn't have more questions like, what do you mean there's 11 realms? But whereas we would have more questions like, what do you mean there's 11 realms? But yeah, they're considered like different worlds. The world of sound is different from the world of speech, but the worlds are all interrelated. Thank you, Maya. In Buddhism, it's not that complex. It's very simple, but it's very detailed. Der Wolf. Now, let's see what he says in the 10th statement. What are the actions, sensations, and habitations? God, this nose, I wish it would stop running. The actions, sensations, and habitations. Because he said those are the objects for the mental powers. So now he's going to explain what they are. Gandha kriti sparsha rasa shravangshi. Visarga ratyartya bijalpa shilpa. ekadasham swikaram mameti. Swikaranam mameti. Shayam aham dvadasham eka ahu. The 5 sensations are scent, form, tactility, flavor, and sound. Gandha, what you can smell. Akriti, what makes a shape. So form. So scent or shape. Sparsh. Sparsh means to touch. So there's the sensations of touch, which is pressure, texture, heat, like that. Like there's various flavors, right? Gandha has now various things to. That's going to be the next thing that he explains. There's the basic quality of gandha. One of the gunas is gandha, how things smell. But then there's various smells, sweet, spicy, etc. One of the gunas is akriti, shapes. But there's also various shapes. There's triangles, there's squares, there's circles, there's curves, ellipses. One of the gunas or qualities is sparsha, tactility, touchability. And then tactility, touchability has these different categories: texture, pressure, warmth, etc. Direction, motion, right? Rasa, that's flavor. Again, that's the one quality is flavor, but then it has many subdivisions: sweet, sour, bitter, etc. Shrava, amsa, the stuff that you can hear. So that also has many different qualifications to it: high pitch, low pitch, loud, quiet, etc. Those are the 5 matras. And if you remember back to Kapila's teachings or the full system of Sankhya, those matras are produced by different bhutas. Different elements produce these. Like the space produces the ability for waves to make sound. And water produces the ability for flavor, rasa. And fire produces the ability for shape, for form, for light, for vision. Like that. So those are the 5 matras, and then there's the 5 karmas, the objects for the akuti powers. The mind has powers of aspiration, and those powers of aspiration take refuge in 5 objects of action. Those are visarga, rati, arti, abhijalpa, and shilpa. Shilpa means how you can use your hands. It means manipulation. Like you want to play a piano, or you want to type on a keyboard. So that inspiration, I want to type something in this chat right now. That's your mana-vṛtti. It's akuti. It has an aspiration to use the hands. It's a combination of things, actually. This Ruchir, you can see how the realms work together. It actually wants to do abhijalpa, which means conversation. But because the tongue is not appropriate for this conversation, it uses the shilpa. It sends that akuti to the manual world, and it uses the hands. So there's the aspirations that take their form through shilpa, or the use of the hands. Then there's the aspirations that take their form through abhijalpa, the use of words, conversation. And then there's arti, which means to move around, locomotion. And then there's rati, which means sex. And then there's visarga, which also sort of means sex, but also means the getting rid of things, spitting things out. So evacuating things. You have waste products left over from eating, for example. You have waste products left over from building a puppet, so you have to take all the clippings and put them in the garbage. So that is also one of the aspirations of the mind, is to clean things out, clean things up. And that's called visarga. And all those are also attached to physical forms. Like I said, shilpa is actually attached to a physical organ, the hands. Locomotion is attached to a physical organ, the feet, etc., etc. But not every life form has the mental powers fully extended. Like not every life form has an ability to see. or not every life form has an ability to hear, but every mind does. Similarly, some humans might be deaf. Even they might be deaf, but the mind still has the ability to hear, but it doesn't have a workable object to connect to. And some life forms don't have ears, or some life forms don't have hands, but they merge it in with some other organ, so they can merge the different tools and not use them fully separately. But it's from the human form onward up through the gods that the full powers of the mind become physically demonstrated. And then the habitations, what did he mean by the habitations? The habitations are amalgams of these. Svikarana. So a habitation is a whole amalgamation of scent, form, tactility, flavor, and sound, elimination, sexuality, locomotion, conversation, and manipulation in what we call a body. A shaya. A body. And that enables the sense of mama, which is the sense of mine. This is mine. These sensations are mine. These things which I can experience are related to this experiencer, this body, this tangible being. That's mine. And that's me. So the body is the thing that enables the mind to actually realize its inherent sense of I and mine. But Bharata says some people sometimes separate. Some people who talk about this, some philosophers, some scientists who talk about this, sometimes separate the I and the mine. Sometimes we put I and mine together as an inseparable thing. But occasionally some people say you can actually think of them separately. I and mine are separate things. It may be possible, in the opinion of these philosophers, to have I without mine. But in the opinion of most, it's not possible. They're two aspects of one thing. So he says, occasionally I is discussed as something separate from mine, in which case it would be the 12th realm of the mind. Great, good, very good stuff. I think this is really good stuff. So let's review. Summary of the previous. Reality is not easy to perceive because it's not what it seems to be. Education and intellect alone don't help. Only a sadhu can utilize those things to begin to comprehend reality. So what's a sadhu? Well, anyone who doesn't realize that the pleasures of our perceptions are like dreams is not a sadhu. And so can't grasp reality no matter how much education and intellect they have, because they're subjective, they're opinionated. They want certain things and they don't want other things. Why can't the non-sadhu grasp reality? Because attachment to things distorts our perception of them. The mind subjects itself to what it wants from its perceptions and so becomes enslaved. Instead of being the master of perception, it becomes a slave of perception. This is how the superior and limitless mind becomes trivialized and subjected to inferiority and limitation. The mind thinks itself defined by its perceptions, and this is why we say reality is a product of your imagination, because the attached perceive an imagined reality. Our mind can have predilection to seek pleasure in the qualities of perception, or it can be reposed peacefully without such qualities. A lamp-wick in ghee can consume the ghee to produce fire and smoke, or it can remain in its natural state. Likewise, our mental functions can be wrapped up in the pursuit of desirable qualities, or can take repose in reality. What are the mental functions? That can be either wrapped up in the qualities or that can be used to experience reality. You can experience reality with these mental functions. That means reality has these things. Reality has scent, forms, smell, etc. Don't get that wrong. What are those functions? There's 5 for aspiration, there's 5 for perception, and then there's the fundamental function, which is self-identification. Now, altogether, that's 11. It uses its 5 aspirational functions to pursue 5 types of action. And it uses its 5 perceptual functions to experience 5 sensations. And its self-identification function to establish a locus of habitation. This, O hero, is why they say there are 11 realms. And he's explained what the actions, sensations, and habitations are. The 5 sensations are scent, form, tactility, flavor, and sound. The 5 actions are elimination, sexuality, locomotion, conversation, and manipulation. And the habitations are amalgams of these, our accumulated self, our body, which is the tangible result and basis of our sense of mine and I. Occasionally, I is discussed as something separate from mind, in which case it's the 12th realm of the mind. Now, Ruhugana would now look around like any of us and say, I see many more than 11 or 12 things in existence. I see a countless number of things in existence. So, if the mind only has 11 functions attached to 11 objects, or maybe 12, then why is there more than 11 or 12 things in the universe? This is explained now. Dravya swabhavasya karma kalair ekadashami manaso vikara sahasra shatasha kotaischa. Wait, what's the right way to say that? Kotishascha. Sahasrasha satasha kotishascha. Kshetra gyato na mituno na swata sya. Kshetra gyato na mitu na swata sya. Over time, these 11 mental functions combine their perceptual. So yeah, maybe this is addressing the question of the realms. Are there 11 realms, separate realms? No, there's one bhumi. There's one realm that we exist in, but this realm is the result of the intersection of the 11 realms. And the intersection of the 11 realms creates combinations which factorialize the number 11 or 12 to produce sahasrasa shatasha kotisha, which means hundreds of thousands of millions of vikara, of variations. So these 11 basic objects of the mind intersect with each other to produce uncountable number of variations of how they can combine. You could have a triangle that tastes sweet. You could have a triangle that tastes salty. You could have a triangle that tastes bitter. You can have a circle that tastes sweet and another circle that tastes sweet, but one of them is red and another one is orange. So you can combine all of the different things in a billion different ways. And that's what produces the universe as we know it. Similarly to the chemist looks at the world the same way. The chemist has a periodic table of some number of elements. Basically like 12 or 13 of them that are really important and abundant. And that's what makes the whole universe. Why? Because they combine with each other in all different ways. Nathaniel says, no, nomadic son Vic, how do we not attach the objects to the objects of perception with the 11th realm being mind, kṣemāya? And the answer to that question is, why would you not light a lamp? And also the answer to the question is, even when the lamp is not lit, the lamp is still in contact with the ghee. Over time, these 11 mental functions combine their perceptual, identitative, and active implications to evolve hundreds of thousands of millions of variations. Jonathan says, why does visarga mean both elimination and sex? Well, sarga means to eject. So sarga, the term sarga is used in connection with procreation or creation because it's the ejection of the fluid is the male part, right? That's how the male participates in the creative process. So the very word sarga means the way that matter emanates from consciousness. And then the visarga, the prefix v can mean something related to but not the same as. So what happens next after you eject? Then the baby develops. So that development of the fetus within the womb is the visarga, but the ejection of the semen is the sarga. So similarly, Brahman ejects prakriti. But the development of prakriti into the gunas and the various different ways, things that the gunas manifest, is the visarga, which is not governed by Bhagavan, it's governed by the jivas interacting with the prakriti. So in that sense, visarga means creativity. So it's primarily Brahma who's the main force behind the visarga, whereas it's Vishnu who's the main force behind the sarga. So visarga can mean creation in a secondary sense, development of a creation. But visarga can mean the result of doing things and the getting rid of things, because sarga means ejection. So on this list, I mean, this is not the only place that we ever heard of the 5 elements, and the 5 karmas, and the 5 indriyas. So we can match this up with everywhere else where people are talking about these 11 things. And we know that somewhere on this list there has to be an evacuation sense. And he's got the word vṛttīr on it. So although we could use the word visarga to mean procreation or even recreation, visarga can mean recreation. It's actually the word vṛttīr that is doing that function in the sentence. So visarga must be using in the sense of getting rid of things. Sarga is not a sound. Sara is a sound, I think. So back to this. Oh, now he makes a really important point. Kshetra gyato namituno na swata. So really, the things that the Puranas is telling us about tattva, or reality, is the same thing that modern science has arrived at by trying to observe it objectively. That you have these basic fundamental things. Like in the early days, they broke it down to things like oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, helium, hydrogen, so forth, right? And that these things combine in different ways and they produce many, many different, all the stuff. And these days, they just take it, the same concept further. You know, hydrogen is produced by these subatomic things. And these subatomic things are produced by these, what they call, what's that guy's name? Fermions and Fermi, and these different very, very small things, and very, very coming down to energies, fields, with the limitations in the field. But it's the same thing. It's actually exactly the same thing that the Bhagavatam, the Puranas, the Upanishads, the Vedas are saying. It's exactly the same. There's just a difference in the words and the specifics. But there's one major, major, major difference. Only one. And that's what Bharata is about to say. Everybody knows, whether it's the ancient mystics or the modern astrophysicists, everybody knows that the universe is created by a combination of smaller things that are created by a combination of smaller things, etc., etc. But where we differ is what is making those things combine. And as a result of that difference, where we also differ is, what is the role of me in all this? Which actually is the most important difference. Usually when these people get the crusaders of anti-science, the mystic crusaders who are all against modern science and against logic and against all that, they get completely off track and they think that the earth is flat because scientists say it's round, or they think that the speed of light isn't the limit of movement because scientists say it is. And they think that the Bhagavatam says the earth is flat, and that they think that the Bhagavatam says the speed of light is not the limit of movement, and it doesn't. The Bhagavatam agrees with science on all the practical points, except this one. And if you really want to know where modern science is going wrong, it's not in its measurements and its observations, which it's doing really good at. The real way that it's going wrong is just right here in what he's about to say. Why do these things happen? What is happening is observable, and science can do a damn good job of figuring it out. But why is it happening? Why is a Higgs field confining a quantum field of photons to produce mass? Why? The Bhagavatam says the exact same thing with different names. The only difference between the Bhagavatam and the Higgs field theory is the question of why does it happen? And because of the difference in the answer of why it happens, the difference between the modern scientific worldview and the ancient mystic worldview also means there's a huge difference in me. What role I play in the universe. The scientists say we don't talk about why. We explain why in terms of the properties that these things have. We don't have why as a separate thing. We say that an electron goes to a proton because the electron is negative and the proton is positive. And positive and negative attract. So this electron has this guṇa of negativity and the proton has this guṇa of positivity. So they attract. And we say that the Higgs field has this property, which we describe with these numbers, and that's why it does this to the photons. And so the reason why all these things interact and then evolve is just because of their own inherent nature. Which it's going to be complicated, really complicated actually. It's more complicated than trying to discuss, way more complicated than trying to discuss sidereal versus tropical. To try to discuss this, because just as you can read things that will make you think wait, I think that's sidereal, you can observe things that make you think wait, I think that this is happening on its own. I think this world is just evolving on its own because the electron does have a negative charge and the proton does have a positive charge, and they do have a mutual inherent attraction on their own. But why? What causes those things to have that configuration so that they produce those effects of joining? Why does a carbon atom exist with a certain shape that it has so that it can combine with other things to enable organic life? Just because is the scientific answer. The best scientific answer is because it couldn't be any other way. And there's probably, therefore, millions of imaginary universes. Science makes fun of Christianity because of how outlandish it is. But, bro, you need to step back and look in the mirror. You got this concept that there are infinite, useless universes to produce one universe with the impossible odds to produce everything the way that it is. To you, that's not laughable. That's because your manas has attachment to your superiority of your intellect And so you like your idea and you think it's great. And you think that a Christian idea is laughable, but your idea is just as laughable. So if you ask modern science, why do these things interact to evolve the way that they did? They'll either say, that's not a question to ask me. Those are the better scientists. Or they'll say, there's no reason why. It's just because. And they have a theory called anthropocentrism, something like that, where it couldn't be any other way. Now, so what does the Bhagavatam say? Here, the Bharata just said, na mituna, na swata. The reason why these 11 things interact to form all the evolutes that have evolved in the universe is not because of swata. It's not because of something inherent in them. And it's not mita. It's not because of the way that they interact with each other. So it is just... Also, we think that modern science is very modern, but it's also eternal. Modern science is very eternal. These ideas, modern telescopes and tools are modern. But the basic concepts are not modern. They've been around forever. For as long as there's been humans with the brain thinking. So you have these discussions in these ancient books. It's not swata. Also, swata philosophy is the Higgs field does this to photons because that's the nature of the Higgs field and the nature of the photon. That would be the swata. It's inherent to them to interact in this way and evolve. Bart says, nah, that's not why they evolved. It's not by their inherent power that they evolve. Another theory is it's not by their inherent power, but it's because of the way that they combine. That they have this inherent combinability. Bart says, no, that's not the thing. There's a reason why they do have swata, they do have mitina, undeniably. The electron is attracted to the proton and vice versa. The Higgs field does interact with the photon the way it does. But that is not the reason why they interact with each other and evolve. The reason is kshetragya. The field, or the kshetra, evolves and transforms and mutates and permutates because there's a outside force working upon it, which is, I think, a Newtonian law. A system remains unchanged unless an outside force acts upon it. What is the force? Gya, similar to the Greek gyon, gnosis, to understand, knowledge, perception, consciousness. So the difference between Vedic science and today's PBS space-time physics is the role of consciousness in the evolution of the universe. The Vedas say that the cause of the evolution of the system is the observer of the system. The modern view is there's no observer of the system, there's only the system. And this system develops on its own and then produces observers. Carl Sagan, famous for saying this. But he's just a mouthpiece for everybody. All the scientists believe this. So what does that mean? What role do you play in the universe? You're frivolity. You're frivolous. You're a byproduct. You're a byproduct. Wow. Out of infinite number of useless universes, one of them did this weird thing and produced these particular atoms that then went on to produce organic structures that then went on to develop senses, that then went on to develop comprehensions and consciousness and a mind, and now are sitting there on YouTube talking about these far out things about how the universe developed. What a weird chance. Yeah, really, what a weird chance. How weird is it? It's so weird that you have to come up with a theory that it's only possible if there's an infinite number of other ones where it didn't happen. So Vedas say, no, consciousness is the basis for reality. And which one is more logical? What is reality? Reality is this thing that you can experience. How can you experience anything if there's not an experiencer? Experience is predicated on the existence of experiencer. And so kshetra is predicated on the existence of kshetragya. The universe is predicated upon consciousness. Consciousness is not a frivolity produced by the universe. But again, just like the sidereal tropical thing can be confusing, this debate is also confusing because at a certain stage of evolution, the universe produces structures which are capable of hosting sentient consciousness. So that's what he says at the end. He says this combination in evolution happens by the force of consciousness, not the mind or its objects, nor by their mutuality. Now that's the really interesting thing. And that's why it is more pleasant and enjoyable to not have vasanas for the objects, but to have kṣemāya, to experience the mind, to experience the self through the mind. Rather than using the mind to experience the objects, use the mind to experience the thing which produced the objects. When you hear a great song, you get inspired by the concept of the creator of the song. This is why computer music is not entirely appealing. When you realize that this universe was produced by consciousness, then your inspiration to enjoy the universe, which is natural, then becomes elevated to enjoy the producer of the universe, to experience the producer of the universe. So now he's introduced the concept of consciousness, which is really the 12th realm. But it's not even a realm. It's the substrate or the foundation for the realms. Okay, so he introduced the mind, and the mind has these powers. The mind has powers of action and perception and identity. And those powers of action fixate upon objects that enable action of activity. If the powers of action fixate upon activities as their objects, the powers of perception fixate upon sensations, and the object of identity fixates upon the conglomeration of all those things into bodies that it inhabits and ascribes as I and mine. Then all of these things interact with each other to produce more and more and more complicated things. And the whole system is driven by consciousness, the experiencer. So now that he brought up consciousness, he's going to talk about pure consciousness versus impure. And this will be the last text that we'll do today. Anthropic principle. Thank you, Ruchira. Kshetragya eta manaso vibhutir. Kshetragya eta manaso vibhutir. Jivasya maya rashitasya nitya. Avirhita kvapi tirohitas. Cha. Shutho vichaste. yavishuddha kartu. Consciousness experiences these mental powers which create the illusion of an eternal living thing, sometimes existing and sometimes not existing. Those who merely observe this are called pure. Those who think these things create and define them are called impure. Consciousness experiences these mental powers. So this manasa vibhuti, kshetragya, is the experiencer of them. So the mind is the thing that has the power, for example, of vision. The mind has the power of vision. The consciousness has the power to observe the mind. So, because the mind can then produce sensations of vision, the consciousness can experience sensations of vision. Because the consciousness observes the mind, it then identifies itself as the mind. And that creates maya-rachitasya jiva, creates an illusory sense of the living being. The consciousness is the true living being. But consciousness utilizing a mind to observe qualities of perception then becomes defined by those perceptions. And then, although it is an eternal thing, nitya, it then experiences avirhita and tirohita. Sometimes the mind is operating and sometimes it's not operating. Sometimes the eyes are open and sometimes they're closed. Sometimes the body is alive, sometimes it's dead. Sometimes the hands work and sometimes they're broken. So, although consciousness has limitless power of perception, it puts itself onto the mind, and therefore a thing which is eternal now experiences itself as sometimes being on and sometimes being off. Tiroha off, aviro is on. Avir, on, tiro, off. There's a sensation of being on and off, turned on and turned off, being alive, being dead, being active, being inactive, being awake, being asleep. And so this thing which is shuddha becomes avishuddha. This thing which is pure then doesn't become impure, but it has a maya-rachitasya avishuddha. It has an illusory creation of the sense of being avishuddha, not perfect. Also, the consciousness will always observe the mano-vibhuti. That's what consciousness does. It observes the mind. It's not able to do anything without the mental tool. It's like a battery. Consciousness is like a battery. A battery is not able to do anything. But the battery is what powers all the different machines that you plug the battery into. So consciousness is like that. It has to have a mind in order to put its electricity into some use. So even pure consciousness will have a mind and utilize the mind, but the impure consciousness will assume that the perceptions generated by the mind are real and define the self. Consciousness experiences these mental powers which create the illusion of an eternal living thing, sometimes existing and sometimes not existing. Those who merely observe this are called pure, but those who think that these things create and define them are called impure. All right. I tried to explain what Bhārata is explaining, but of course I can't really explain it so clear because I'm not completely clear on it either, but I tried to explain it to the best of my ability. So let's just review what we did today, and meanwhile I'll look up whatever you said here. Actually, let's just let's, out of respect to Bhagavatam, let's finish up by reviewing this, and then I'll look at your questions or whatever. Reality is not easy to perceive because it's not what it seems to be. Education and intellect alone don't help. Only a sadhu can utilize those things to begin to comprehend reality. Anyone who doesn't realize that the pleasures of our perceptions are like dreams is not a sadhu, and so can't grasp reality no matter how much education and intellect they have, because attachment to things distorts our perceptions of them. The mind subjects itself to what it wants from its perceptions and so becomes enslaved by them, and this is how the superior and limitless mind becomes trivialized and subjected to inferiority and limitations. Consequently, this is why the unlimited perception of consciousness becomes limited and prone to fallacy. 7. The mind thinks itself defined by its perceptions, and this is why we say reality is a product of your imagination. The attached perceive to the reality that they imagine. Our mind can have predilection to seek pleasure in qualities of perception, or it can be reposed peacefully without such qualities. A lamp-wick and ghee can consume the ghee to produce fire and smoke, or it can remain in its natural state. And that's a great analogy if you consider why you turn a lamp on or don't turn it on. Likewise, our mental functions can be wrapped up in the pursuit of desirable qualities, or it can take repose in reality. What are the mental functions? The mind has 11 of them, 5 for aspiration, 5 for perception, and the fundamental function, self-identification. It uses its 5 aspirational functions to pursue 5 types of action, its 5 perceptual functions to experience 5 sensations, and its self-identification function to establish a locus of habitation. This, O hero, is why they say there are 11 realms. The 5 sensations are scent, form, tactility, flavor, and sound. The 5 actions are elimination, sexuality, locomotion, conversation, and manipulation. And the habitations are the amalgams of these. Our accumulated self, our body, which is the tangible resultant basis of our sense of mind and I. Occasionally, I is discussed as something separate from mind, in which case it's the 12th realm of the mind. Over time, these 11 mental functions combine their perceptual, identitative, and active implications to evolve hundreds of thousands of millions of variations. This happens by the force of consciousness, not the mind or its objects, nor by their mutuality. Consciousness experiences these mental powers, which creates the illusion of an eternal living thing, sometimes existing and sometimes not existing. Those who merely observe this are called pure, but those who think that these things create and define them are called impure. Vana, is the mind a male principle? It is. So the mind is androgynous because it has 5 male functions and 5 female functions and 1 neutral function. Do you know the difference between the male and the female functions? The akutis are male and the diyas are female. Perception is female because things are coming into you, and action is male because things are going out from you. Energy comes in, energy goes out. Male, female. Thank you, Nomad. Karina, if the body can move without the mind controlling it, what is making that happen? It can't move without the mind controlling it. Who said the body can move without the mind controlling it? Oh, so Guna is asking if mind is male and Guna is female. Yeah, in that sense. You see how fluid gender dynamics are? Gender is about the relationship between one thing and another. People always say, what's up with the moon? Well, what's up with Venus? I thought Venus was a female planet, but how come you're talking about the god of it being a male? Chandra, what do you mean Chandra had fathered a child? Chandra is a mom. But gender is about how one thing relates to another. If you change, gender is about how A relates to B. If you change B, then the gender of A may change. If you bring in C, then A may change its gender because it has a gender in relation to B. What might not be the same as its gender in relation to C. So, gender is about how one thing relates to another. So, the mind itself is androgynous. It has equal masculine and feminine vṛttīr or function. In relation to guna, mind is entirely male and guna is entirely female. Or is that not necessary to say? That's actually not necessary to say either, because the guna puts itself into the mind through perception, and the mind puts itself into the guna through action. So it's still an androgynous relationship. Vic, are you working on this stuff for the nishta thingy? I have no idea what that means. Maybe a little off topic. Is AI somehow a part or form of this consciousness at the base of reality? AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, what actually is the definition of AI? It's machines that humans created to simulate the way that humans utilize buddhi or intellect. So if we use that as the definition of AI, then there's no AI before there's humans. So you can't have AI driving the evolution of the universe, because AI by definition is something created by something that evolved later in the universe. However, if you change the definition of AI as to an intellect created by another intellect, that opens the doors. And then you go into a Battlestar Galactica kind of thing, the modern Battlestar Galactica series, where you start to realize, wait, humans are AI. The human intellect is a machine designed by Brahma. And Brahma himself is a machine designed by Vishnu. So Vishnu is the original intellect, and the rest are derived intellects. Or are you asking, is AI conscious? But that again asks. But that has also answered your question already. Are you conscious? You're AI. Are humans talented enough to create an AI which could be conscious? Is a debatable question. Brahma is certainly talented enough to create AI which consciousness can utilize. Can humans? My opinion is, of course, because consciousness can utilize a whole lot of things that are really simpler than human level intellect. After all, consciousness is animating all the parameciums and all that stuff. So is AI conscious? Probably. If what you're creating is a buddhi, but instead of creating it in the sukshma realm, you're creating it in the electrical Agni realm, or in some magnetic realm or something. What we're creating with AI is buddhi, but we're creating it in like an inferior realm, which is a physical, semi-physical realm with using electronics. The buddhi that we have doesn't have any physical component to it. It doesn't need silicon chips. It doesn't need anything. Some say it does. Some say it requires carbon. Some say it requires the brain. It doesn't function without a brain. So in that sense, there's very little difference between your intellect and artificial intelligence. It's the same thing. Are the grahas gunas? The gunas are the qualities that we can experience. And if you say that 5 of the qualities are scent, etc., scent, form, smell, then you know that those qualities are produced from the bhutas, and the grahas correspond to the 5 grahas correspond to the 5 bhutas. I mean, what is artificial? Artificial means created by art. Yeah, so my intellect is an artificial intellect. It was created by my parents on the basis of a template created by Manu, on the basis of a template created by Brahma, on the basis of a template created by Vishnu, on the basis of a template of what Vishnu is. So I would say the real difference between Elon Musk or whoever's artificial intelligence and the rest of the creation is just who's the artificer, who's the artist. It's just coming to a point in history where humans can be the artist using the medium of electricity. And if you know what the yogic powers are, they may have been doing things like that using other mediums in the ancient past. All right, that's enough for today. Machines create better music than us. Music is awful these days because there's so much machines involved in it. Good night.